Hey everyone, welcome to the Humane Workforce Podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Lawrence from Practical Workforce Planning, and this podcast delves into the impact of artificial intelligence on the workforce and in particular on job design. The aim being to create a workforce where humans and AI can thrive together. So this podcast is for HR professionals. However, if you're a business leader, a tech enthusiast, or simply curious about the future of work, you're also welcome here too. And today we are going to explore HR's role in ethical AI. And to help me do that, I've brought in an expert, Dr. Emily Cook. Emily is a senior organisational psychologist and is currently working at Top Employers Institute. And Emily has recently published a white paper, Ethical AI in the World of Work, a framework for success, which we'll be discussing today. And Emily, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. So great to be here, Sarah. Any opportunity to talk about AI, I'm absolutely
Oh,
there.
fantastic. And I'd like to start with, can you tell us a bit about yourself and what your
hmm
current role is and how did you get there?
Absolutely. At the moment, I work as a HR researcher here at Top Employers Institute. But maybe to rewind, to go back a decade or so, I actually studied neuroscience. So I did my PhD back in the UK in neuroscience. At that point, I was very interested in human intelligence. So I was very interested in why some people seem to spot patterns, they seem to be able to succeed at work, in tests, and for other people, it just comes more difficultly to go in that direction. So I was looking at what kinds of differences exist in the brains of very, very intelligent people compared to people of a regular, normal level of intelligence. And I loved research. I loved it so much. I feel just very lucky that I had that chance to go incredibly deep on one topic. But I was also quite lonely. I think academia can be very lonely. You're working on your own. You have a very specific interest. Probably one of the few people in the world with that interest. And you spend a lot of time alone, analyzing, writing. So after about 7 years of that study, I was ready to be with other people. So after that, I actually went straight into HR. My first role was over in Amsterdam in the Netherlands with Philips. Back then, they were called Philips Health Tech. I think they have a slightly different name now, in HR strategy. I was there for a few years. Then I went over to Switzerland to work with PMI, and did some HR strategy in that space as well. And then just a couple of years ago, I joined Top Employers Institute as a HR researcher.
That's a really interesting background and all the research that you've did, especially on, the patterns and how the brain works. And that would be so helpful in the HR space because I think I can speak for myself too. I haven't done anywhere near that level of study about the brain and about how it works and how it impacts human behavior, which ultimately business is people. So,
Absolutely,
that
yeah.
whole connection then into the HR world must have been really interesting with your experience and all the study that you've done as well, all the years
hmm
of study. So, Top Employers Institute, can you talk a bit about who are Top Employers Institute? What do they do? I'm not sure how big their presence is in Australia, um, but yeah, a bit of background on that would be good too.
Sure. So Top Employers Institute has quite a descriptive name, probably a very accurate name. Top Employers Institute has the goal of making the world of work better. And towards that goal, one of our core activities is certifying global organizations as being top employers. This has, of course, for the organizations themselves, it's a great way to attract talent. That's one of the primary reasons, of course. But more than that, many organizations are increasingly recognizing the important role they are playing in society, in the lives of the people that work for them, and they genuinely want to offer the best HR experience. They really do want to be top top employers. So Top Employers Institute offer a certification program. So unlike a lot of other awards that you might see given, Top Employers Institute will only certify an organization when we've gone in ourselves and really done a fact-finding mission, both to understand where that organization is on a range of HR best practices, but also to really collaborate and to coach these organizations to continue improving, to continue adjusting to the trends in the world of work. My role is in support of that overall goal. My work is very research focused. So I'm always interested in what is going to be the next big trend. What is going to be the next challenge that our colleagues in our organizations that we certify will be facing next year? But what about 5 years? What about 10 years? How can we prepare for what's coming next? We work with around 2,300 organizations, which means we get sort of a bird's eye look at everything that's going on, both what people are doing, but perhaps even more interestingly, what questions their business leaders are asking their HR colleagues. That's often the most insightful. And of course, in the field of AI, lots of people have lots of questions.
Yes, absolutely. That's really interesting. So these organisations then, they're really interested in being the best in HR in terms of valuing their people in their organisation. And through the thought leadership, I suppose, and the best practice work that you do, that's then provided to them, is it, as part of their membership into the Top Employers Institute, to then tap into that thought leadership and knowledge for their HR practitioners to actually then keep up to date and upskill, because that's one of the biggest challenges, isn't it, when you're working in a HR team, is just knowing where to go and find things to update yourself.
Absolutely. And there is so much you can read. I mean, if you Google HR best practices, you're going to get billions of results, and new ones are going to come every single day. So it's really just knowing, what does it mean? What does it mean to be offering good HR best practices? And something that we are able to do, because we are at the center of these many organizations, is not only recommend best practices based on theory, but really to understand what is driving success in those organizations. So, of course, employee engagement, turnover, loss of good talent, these are really important metrics. But we also get a lot of questions from our clients on what is driving business growth, what is driving profitability. So we want to make sure that these practices both are important for employees, but also are important for those business success metrics.
That's fantastic, because it is a two-way relationship, isn't it? At the end of the day, there has to be something in it for both parties in terms of the value. So that's really important. And then segueing into the big hot topic, artificial intelligence. It's everywhere at the moment. We'll go into your white paper in a moment, but what are your thoughts on AI in general at the moment?
So I strangely would have set out one of the slower adopters. I remember maybe 3 or 4 years ago when I was working in HR strategy, I was working alongside a lot of people with technology backgrounds or with finance backgrounds, and because of the way strategy is set up, it's very cross-functional. And they were so excited. They were excited, like trying out these like very early versions of ChatGPT that weren't really giving good results. And I was quite reluctant. I have spent my entire career studying, first of all, the human brain, and then the way that humans interact in workplaces. Very complex human cognition, very complex human behavior. So for me, I thought like, no, okay, it's gonna assist. It's gonna maybe shorten some of our analysis times. But I think that the scale that it's grown at, the speed that it's grown at, I think we'll come on to some of these conversations, but we're really talking about this technology being able to at least support, and in some cases even replace, incredibly complex human behaviors.
Yeah, and that's the part for me that is a little bit scary, to be honest. Like when I think about the potential of that, and that is why it's so important right now in any organisation for people to be thinking about what they're doing now because that is actually going to create the future. So I feel like it's a very critical time right now for business leaders and HR practitioners in particular to have the courage, I think, to actually just try and go deep into this a bit and really understand artificial intelligence and its impact on jobs, which is sort of segues then into your white paper, which is Ethical AI in the World of Work, a Framework for Success, and we'll go through firstly, Emily, around, you talk about the big opportunity. So ethical AI can be a driver of business success. And I think one of the questions you ask in there is, how can AI be leveraged to drive business success in a way that is respectful to employees and responsible to society overall? Could you elaborate a little bit on that in terms of how you...
Absolutely. So these are big questions.
They're huge.
I
When I
think
read
when
it,
I came into
my blood pressure went up a bit. I was like, I'm being honest
absolutely
with you. Like, I read that and I think, this is why people are going to probably be a bit like, whoa, yeah,
scared. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
I think indeed there's two pieces for this. I don't think, I mean, when I came into HR 10 years ago, I didn't expect to be facing these kinds of dilemmas, this kind of responsibility. These are questions that go far beyond our normal scope as HR. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't have a place at the table. The challenging, but also the amazing thing about the speed at which technology is moving is that nobody can be an expert on every element of it. So, of course, we have fantastic colleagues in technology functions I'm in San Francisco, so in startups, who know exactly how this very complicated technology works. You know, they know the numbers that go in and the numbers that come out. But they don't know. They don't know what it really means to go to work every day and to make sure the work is designed in a way that's purposeful. They don't understand necessarily how to embed well being in an organization. They probably haven't had hands on experience like many HR professionals have had with mass layoffs and the fallout that comes from that, both to individuals and to families and to communities. So, in no way am I saying that HR must be the expert in AI. I am, in fact, saying that probably nobody really in the world is going to be the expert on the entire breadth of AI. We need to come together and to offer our perspectives. So I think that the calling to HR professionals is to join the conversation, to provide your incredibly relevant experience and expertise around what it means to have a positive working life, a positive workplace. I hope that makes it a
It
little bit
does,
less
because you
terrible.
also talk about the role of HR in AI. And I think it's a really key point you made there, though, about the fact that no one is going to understand all of this. It's impossible. And you would understand that more than anyone in terms of studying the brain. And I think if everyone can take that on board and just say, I can do a little part, I can play a part in this and contribute in a positive way. If everyone does their part in a positive way, that's all you can ask. But it can be quite overwhelming, can't it, in terms of the rapid pace that it's all happening, and then trying to get bombarded all the time with emails and different things saying, oh, this app that you've got can now do this and it can do this. And you're thinking, do I need to understand that? And it's sort of challenging all the time to think, what is the noise that I can disregard and what is the noise I actually need to take on board? Isn't it? It's that sort of information overload, and where your brain, you'd know this more than me, your brain gets to a point where it goes, I can't take on anymore right now.
Yeah, so much of the media around AI is quite alarmist. And we also know about the brain is when you're bombarded with a lot of fear, you just shut down. There's no more logical thought, there's no more long-term planning. You're just now terrified.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So we've got to try and stay away from that, don't we, in terms of the HR practitioner. I think you've got the role of HR in AI, and you've got some tips in your white paper about just elaborating on that a bit further. HR to be a thought leader, a value keeper, a storyteller when it comes to AI. HR to help tailor, implement, and sustain AI solutions. So, but again, coming back to what you said earlier, in conjunction with other stakeholders in the organisation. So
Absolutely.
HR not having to be the absolute owner for AI and driver of AI, but there is a part for HR people to play in this positively, in
Absolutely.
adding that value.
Absolutely.
So I think that's really important for HR professionals to take on board right now. Is just, do you think it's just get started?
I think where we've seen some of our clients really be successful in getting their seat at the table is introducing AI solutions within the HR function as a starting point. Because then you're very much playing in your own expertise. You also have the decision making rights because you're just in your own function. You haven't got to get the entire organization on board. And you can start experimenting, getting comfortable yourself, but also demonstrating to the organization, like, look what we're doing. We've done this in a way that's aligned with our purpose, aligned with our values, and we're also improving our productivity. I think that can be a lot less scary than trying to think about an organization-wide, huge implementation.
Yeah, that's really great advice there. The framework that you've come up with to assist HR professionals with this talks about 3 foundational pillars, and they are human-centric, evidence-based, and long-term lens. Could you
Mm-hmm.
just touch on each of those 3 and just give sort of a bit of a summary about, firstly, like what's human-centric about? What do people need to be looking and thinking about there?
So this is perhaps one of the most challenging aspects of this conversation when we talk about introducing AI into the workplace. We have this not necessarily a conflict, but always a balance about what's good for our employees and what would make the most financial success for the business. And of course, we're all in business for a reason. Um, so of course, we don't deprioritize those ambitions. But it also doesn't mean that we completely neglect our responsibility to be a good employer. Not only because it's the right thing to do, but also because we all know in HR that if you disregard the employee experience, very quickly everything falls apart. No matter how good your technology might be, or your strategy, or your business success, if you have unhappy employees, you're not going to get very far. So, being human centric means that when you're making decisions about the technology, you consider the role of the human. You start with, what does this technology mean for the human? And we very deliberately use that word human and not that word employee. Because these are people, they are people with thoughts, with ambitions, with personal lives, with well being concerns. We consider the whole human and we think about how a potential technology might impact them.
That's really, really important, isn't it? And I do like the word human, and I've used that in my podcast at the start, where humans and AI can thrive together, because the
Absolutely.
human side of this is going to be so important in terms of, yes, businesses are there to make money and they want to make a profit and they want to add value. And
Mm-hmm.
so, again, it's that balance, isn't it, between the business side of it, but also the human side, and then incorporating the AI element in an ethical manner through this framework that you've
Absolutely.
provided, some guidance to HR practitioners. They can follow these pillars and they can work through it and say, well, what does that then mean? What does that mean for the business? But what does that then mean for the humans, as you say,
Mm-hmm.
in the business? And that, I think those 3 pillars really provide a framework there for people to start, as I said, just start
Yeah.
thinking about it. Just start, do something in the space. And you can take that to your executives as well. Like when they ask you, oh, what do we do? The question will come to the chief
Mm-hmm.
HR operating officers, to say, what are we doing in this space? What's our policy on this? This is a great place to start, isn't it? To look at that. Because the
Absolutely.
podcast is focused around artificial intelligence and the impact on job design and work design,
Mm-hmm.
I noticed in your paper you talk about under the human centric, you have design work with purpose in mind.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think the ethical considerations are needed when you're redesigning jobs with AI in mind? Could you elaborate a bit on that?
So, in coming up with this framework, we spoke to people across the field, including, of course, a lot of people who work in more academic, very theoretical, and very intense research focused forms of psychology and work design. We also spoke to clients who are hands on in the field. We spoke to employees who work in these spaces. And something that comes through wherever we look is that people can't be happy unless they believe that their work has meaning. And what that means is people need to know that the work that they're doing has an impact on something that they care about. So when we think about introducing, that sounds like a given. It sounds like you go to work, you write your email, somebody receives the email, they take an action, or you go to work in a factory perhaps, and you make a car, and then you see someone driving the car. That's actually incredibly important for your psychological well-being, to know that you're having an impact. It hasn't got to be a big impact, hasn't even got to be an impact you particularly care about. You just have to have that coherence in the work design. When we start to introduce AI, that can get disrupted incredibly quickly. So if you're working with perhaps a technology that you don't necessarily understand, it could be giving you instructions. You don't know where those instructions are coming from. You don't know how that links to the goals of the company. That AI doesn't explain it to you, it just instructs you. Likewise, you could be you could have decisions made instead of having a leader, you could be having decisions made about the direction of the company. And no one has explained to you how the AI is making those prioritization decisions. So you're just very much lost with this sense of meaning. What you're doing to you feels meaningless. So when we start to think about job design, we have to remember, we have to keep going back to what we know, what's established in the field, but also what we know from our own hands-on experience through our careers as HR practitioners. The fundamental rules around what makes work design work haven't changed.
Yeah, that's, and I think traditionally throughout the years of working in HR, I'm not sure we've been great, like in the HR profession, at the job design aspects within organisations. And I know in Australia, we arch ourselves onto what we call position descriptions. When you start a role, you say, this is my position, this is what, it looks like, this is what I'm doing. And as soon as you start the job, you look at it, you go, I'm actually not real. That's not really my job. And you get into the role, and then you start to craft the role yourself somewhat based on your capabilities and your strengths and that sort of thing. And then the job description goes away, and then you have a performance review and it comes back and it says, oh, what if, you look at, well, what are the things I'm meant to be, achieving and working on? And then again, that sort of changes as well quite quickly. With the age of AI coming in on top of that, I can imagine people's jobs changing a lot faster as well. Like when you start a job, sometimes within 12 months you go, oh, my job's changed a lot in that time. Do you think in the age of AI, people are going to have to be a bit more adaptable in terms of going with the flow, learning the technology where they can and understanding how it applies to their role or their function, the HR function, as you said earlier? That's quite a mindset shift, isn't it, from the days of the position description?
Absolutely. So I think that we talked when I first started my career, we talked about, it's the end of a job for life. And now that seems so archaic. Now I feel like it's the end of a job for even 5 years. I think it's just kind of going to become the norm that we transition more easily into new jobs, into new companies, perhaps switching between freelance, full-time work, part-time work. This is going to become much more natural. We are seeing the younger generation, so Gen Z, actually are prepared for this. They're very much prepared for this kind of career and very much embrace it. There are a lot of benefits to that. I think from a HR perspective, perhaps we're the ones that needs to start to keep up with that. So if job roles are going to be changing, how are we going to manage that? How are we going to manage all of this onboarding, all of this offboarding? Are we prepared to facilitate that?
Yeah, it's going to be moving so rapidly. I think that mindset of just being comfortable, being uncomfortable, isn't it ultimately?
Yeah,
I think everyone, if they can get on board with that, just if you're feeling uncomfortable, you're actually probably doing the correct things.
I think that people can tolerate a lot of uncertainty, a lot of change, a lot of discomfort if that they know that the organization is acting in a way that is ethical and purpose driven. So I think that if they trust and the organization has demonstrated, okay, this is challenging, it's a learning curve, but we're going to get there in the end, people will be able to cope with that. I think where it gets very challenging is when there's a sense of mistrust or something is being hidden, then that kind of adjustment and flexibility just isn't on the table.
Yeah, so it is time then for HR people really to step up. It's a time for HR to
Absolutely.
shine
Absolutely.
alongside
I
all the
think
other internal and external stakeholders. And I think in your paper, the emphasis being that, the future of work benefits all. It has to benefit the
absolutely.
organisation and the humans that work in the organisation as well, to ensure that we have jobs for people that's meaningful and has purpose, like you said,
Mhm.
so that we have a society that, is good for everyone. It's working well for everybody, isn't it?
Absolutely. One of the most interesting things that we learned about when we were creating this paper is the work that organizations are starting to do at a societal level. So, a lot of these challenges are just so difficult to face when you only stay within your own organization. So, we see some leaders in this space, for example, Microsoft, IMB, have reached out to form a consortium to start having these conversations at a more global level. Conversations like what will happen to these people if we automate their jobs? How are we going to work together with the governments to reskill them, to support them, to redeploy them? If we are going to demand a lot more skills from our entry level employees, are we equipping our school systems to make sure that they are building those skills during the normal younger educational phase? These are incredibly important questions and huge questions. So that cross-organizational collaboration is really going to be key.
So maybe, do you think one of the tips for HR people is to think about who are the organisations externally to them that they could actually partner with instead of looking at like a competitor type thing? There might be organisations that they could partner with to actually come together and create those, sort of groups, think tanks, whatever you want to call them, to
Absolutely.
actually
Ab-
bounce off those ideas.
Absolutely. I think that we are all learning, not only in HR, but also in the world of work more broadly. And any collaboration, I think, would be, I mean, of course, in some cases it's not possible, but I think in most cases, most organizations are parts of organizations like Top Employees Institute, but we also have other consortiums, other ways to network with colleagues. Most organizations are already part of one of these partnerships. So I think just, I am always open to connections on LinkedIn, and I think most people in HR are. It's always nice to reach out to someone to say, "Hey, I saw your organization in the news. Can we have 15 minutes? Can we have 20 minutes?" I don't think very many people would say no.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, any final tips for HR professionals trying to navigate AI adoption, Emily?
So I would say it all comes back to the basics. It all comes back to what we already know. Purpose is important. Strong foundational HR best practices are important. Ongoing learning and development is important. We are very much working in a new challenge, but the things that we know work still work.
Yeah, fantastic. And where can people find you and seek your assistance and find out more about what you're doing and what you've got coming up.
Absolutely. So I'm always open to anybody who would like to talk to me about AI, as you know. But if you would like to read the research from Top Employers Institute, you can find it at top-employers.com/blog. All of our insights are stored there.
Fantastic. And we can put those in the show notes as well. You've been amazing today. Thank you so much. I feel like we've only scratched the surface on this.
I feel like I could talk about AI for literally hours.
Oh, and to my audience, I hope you've learnt something today here. And you can put in practice some of the tips that, from Emily's white paper, and stay tuned for upcoming episodes. And in the meantime, if you want to reach out to me about anything, you can contact me via my website, Practical Workforce Planning. And thank you everybody for joining us today.